Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. Guys, we're taking a look today at the New Jersey Devils as we continue our season preview series. So, let's get right into the Devils. So, the Devils didn't have a lot of guys that left the organization. So, I guess that's a dub for the Devils in that regard. They lost Nathan Bastian in the expansion draft, going to the Seattle Kraken. And they traded out Will Butcher. Kind of a cap dump move, moving Will Butcher to the Buffalo Sabres. And that was part of the reconstructing of the blue line, which the Devils took a lot of criticism throughout parts of last season, that their defense wasn't very good. They didn't have a lot of goal-scoring depth up front. The Devils looked to change that this summer, and Tom Fitzgerald was definitely busy. Now, this kind of reminds me of what we saw back a couple years ago with the Devils. They brought in Jack Hughes. They brought in PK Subban. They made a couple moves like bringing in Nikita Gusev. And it looked like the Devils were going to be this team that was going to be a force to be reckoned with in that very tough Metropolitan Division. That didn't end up being the case, but they're hoping to rewrite the script this year. So you look at some of the additions. Tomas Tatar, they picked him up about a week into free agency. One of the bigger wingers left on the board. So that was a really nice pickup. Tatar is going to be a guy that helps get you into the playoffs. And that's really what the Devils are hoping for right now. They just want to punch their ticket to the dance. It doesn't matter winning a Stanley Cup right now. Obviously, that's the long-term goal. But just getting into the postseason is the first task for the Devils. And adding some winger depth with Tomas Tatar was a huge piece of that. You have some guys returning like Jesper Bratt. You have guys like Miles Wood. You have guys like Andreas Janssen. You're hoping that those guys continue to develop as wingers alongside the Nico Hischiers, alongside the Jack Hugheses. Not to mention, you've got guys like Alexander Holtz that are going to be coming up hopefully this season. So there is a lot of good stuff in New Jersey in terms of their forward core. And also some good news on the back end. They bring in the big fish free agent here in the 2021 free agency class. That can sometimes be a death sentence, but here with Dougie Hamilton, they signed him to a big contract this year, and Dougie Hamilton, by the end of the day, had signed that deal with New Jersey pretty much all day. They were trying to, figure out the little details of the signing, but they were able to get that done. A huge ad for the Devils to show that, maybe they did have to throw some more money at Dougie Hamilton, but they're enough of a destination where Dougie Hamilton wanted to sign there in the first place. I think he's taken a lot of criticism for taking the bag here. But let's be honest, he still has to have somewhat of a desire to want to play in New Jersey, and that was there. Now you look at some of the moves they made via trade. They brought in Ryan Graves from the Colorado Avalanche right before free agency. I also want to mention that they did lose Mikhail Maltsev in that trade, so that is another player they lost this season. But he wasn't that big of a loss. They have enough guys in that middle six, even bottom six forward winger role that he's not that big of a loss. They bring in a guy in Ryan Graves that's going to add some more fortitude on that left side. Probably going to be playing on that top pair alongside either Damon Severson or Dougie Hamilton. It's probably going to be Dougie Hamilton if we're going to be honest, but I think a really nice add there in Ryan Graves. There is some criticism on that contract, and as the Devils get better, maybe that contract doesn't look so good in another 2 years from now, but as of right now, the Devils want to get into the postseason. They wanted to add some grit, some size, and a little bit of just that little bit of nastiness to their team. And a guy like Ryan Graves will be there to protect some of the young guys like Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. Not to mention they bring in Christian Jaros via free agency. Kind of a depth signing, but I think a really good pickup for the New Jersey Devils. They brought in Luke Hughes via the draft with the number 4 overall draft pick. And it really wasn't that much of a surprise. I'd pretty much been guaranteeing that for the past year now, that we would likely see Luke Hughes in New Jersey. And that's what we ended up getting. So a nice ad there. He's going to go back to the University of Michigan, that stacked team. They're going to be a really good team. I wouldn't mind actually watching them this season. Maybe if they take a trip to Penn State, maybe I'll go up there for that. But and then they also added goaltender Jonathan Bernier. Now, this was an interesting situation for Bernier. He had an interesting offseason. He was with the Detroit Red Wings last season on a rebuilding franchise. And then he ends up going to the Carolina Hurricanes in a weird trade where we see Jonathan Bernier get traded for Alex Nedeljkovic. The Carolina Hurricanes have the rights to Bernier. They don't lock him down. They decide to go with some other goaltenders in the market. So Jonathan Bernier ends up in New Jersey. So he'll be a nice backbone behind a guy like Mackenzie Blackwood that Aaron Dell just wasn't able to do that last season. And Mackenzie Blackwood is the guy. He is the projected future there in Jersey. So this is a guy that you're kind of relying on helping backstop him. And with that veteran leadership in Bernier, this is going to be a very nice ad for the Devils. Now, looking at their lineup. Well, actually, before we get into that, let's look at their top point producers last season and what they lost and what they brought in. So, Pavel Zacha, who had an unreal season last year. Again, he only had 35 points. He didn't light the world up by storm, but he led the team in points. Jack Hughes, Yegor Sharangovich, Jesper Bratt, Miles Wood, Yanni Kuokkanen, Ty Smith, again, another defenseman we're going to talk about here. Damon Severson, PK Subban and Travis Zajac. They are, Zajac's no longer there. Paul Murray's no longer there. Ryan Murray left via free agency. Will Butcher is no longer there. Nathan Bastian. So some of those guys, they're no longer going to be there. But the good news is some of the additions that they added with Hamilton and Tatar are going to help offset some of those losses. Now you look at their forward core. You've got Yanni Kuokkanen, Jack Hughes, and Yegor Sharangovich. I wouldn't be surprised if Tatar ends up on that line alongside Jack Hughes. But that is what, according to Daily Faceoff, that's what they have. You have Tomas Tatar, Nico Hischier, and Jesper Bratt. And then you've got in the bottom six, Miles Wood, Pavel Zacha, Michael Mccloud, and then to round out your bottom pair, you have Nolan Foote, Jesper Boqvist, and Andreas Janssen. And I actually like a lot of those pieces. I think, Nolan Foote, obviously the son of Adam Foote and his brother Cal, who is playing in Tampa right now. Some really talented prospects. And Boqvist is another guy. Again, his brother Adam is now playing in Columbus, so they're in the same division now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Michael Mccloud, again, another gritty power forward guy. Pavel Zacha, Miles Wood. They've got some real bruisers in that bottom six, and they're fairly young. And I think this is really going to be an interesting Devils team. Now you look at their defense, it's definitely gotten a lot better. You look at their top pairing, completely different from last year. Ryan Graves and Dougie Hamilton, both guys that they picked up in the offseason this year. Ty Smith, who was a rookie last season, a full season under his belt coming into this year. He's got to be more confident. I think that's one of the key things. Again, you see guys that are a little bit timid in that first season, even from some of the top defensive prospects from last season, like Colorado Avalanche's Bowen Byram. You go through some of those, those little hiccups through the season, and I think that was just part of it for Ty Smith. It didn't help that he was on a weaker Devils team to begin with, but I think we're going to see him emerge as a top four pairing defenseman this season, as well as Damon Severson, who I have really liked in New Jersey. I hate him as an Islander fan, but as a from a Devils perspective, you gotta love Damon Severson, and the fact he's lasted through all these recent rumors that they would trade him. Really, really good stuff that they decided to keep him. And then the third pairing, this is where things definitely fall off a little bit. And that's why a guy like Christian Jaros is definitely maybe more important than you would think. Because you look at the third pairing, Jonas Siegenthaler, who I really loved in Hershey with the Hershey Bears, but he just hasn't gotten there yet with the Devils. He did have a decent season at points. It just wasn't consistent. And obviously PK Subban, who is really one of the most disappointing players the last 2 years. In New Jersey, and his contract, $9 million, which they're paying Dougie Hamilton, that does come off the books next summer. In between the pipes, like we've already talked about, you got Mackenzie Blackwood as your 1A and Jonathan Bernier as your 1B option. So the Devils look pretty solid in between the pipes for the most part. Again, as long as Mackenzie Blackwood has recovered from his positive test, which he was never the same after he had COVID. He had a really good start to the season. The Devils look good. And then he got COVID, and it took him a while to get back into it. But at the end of the season, the last 10 to 15 starts he had at the end of the year, he actually looked pretty good. And then obviously Jonathan Bernier to add some depth. You look at the Devils cap, they are at the lower end of the league in terms of salary. They still have a lot of money, over $12 million in cap space. And right now you look at their cap space, their cap hit today is $69 million. So, I believe they're at the floor, which is exactly what Tom Fitzgerald wants. Lindy Ruff it's going to be interesting to see how Lindy Ruff handles a lot of the young guys in New Jersey, because this is a very young team. And Lindy Ruff is known to not play the young guys. And I wonder how that dynamic's going to work this year. Because I think Lindy Ruff, Devils fans might not like me for saying this, but he doesn't gel with the guys that are on this team that are young, like Miles Wood, like Jesper Bratt. I just don't know if he's going to be a fit long-term for their development. And we saw a lot of them on the scratch pad. And now you bring in guys like Tomas Tatar, which I think is a great addition, but now you're taking away minutes from guys like Sharon Govich and potentially an Alexander Holtz who could jump into the lineup this year. So with that said, where do the New Jersey Devils stand here in 2021-2022? Do they get into the Stanley Cup playoffs? My answer is no. I believe they will miss the playoffs here in 2022. Now, it's not that they're a bad team. Honestly, I think if they were out in the Pacific Division, they're able to lock down maybe one of those final wildcard spots. But the problem is, in the Metropolitan Division, I've talked about this ad infinitum at this point, there are way too many good teams in that Metro. It's stacked. And the problem is we don't know where some of those maybe fringe teams, maybe like the Pittsburgh Penguins, like Philly, even Washington, we're starting to see a changing of the guard. Those three teams aren't a lock to get in the playoffs. As teams like New Jersey, as teams like the New York Rangers start to continue to move forward, I don't know if the Devils, even with that, can get into the playoffs. So I have them missing the playoffs in 2022. But considering where they've been the past couple of seasons as a bottom 5 team with 2 first overall draft picks in 3 years, I think the Devils' future does look bright. But I do have them missing the postseason at the end of the day. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the New Jersey Devils heading into the 2021-2022 Stanley Cup playoffs? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.